Welcome to the Gen AI podcast, where the future meets fun and tech talk trends. Get ready to dive into the world of artificial intelligence like never before. Your hosts, Dale, Alan, Greg, and Val, are about to take you on a wild ride through the AI universe. So, buckle up, tune in, and let the AI adventure begin.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Gen AI podcast. It's been a little while since we've been with you. That's because we've been all over the show at different conferences in different countries. Greg, you've traveled more than me in the past couple of months or so. How have you been?
It's been a lot of fun. I tell you what, when I was younger, my dad used to travel, and I was like, oh, it must be great. You get to, going on holiday's awesome and flying's awesome. And he said, it's not so awesome when you travel this much. I've really enjoyed seeing the customers and seeing people and seeing different countries. I've got to countries I've never been to before. My God, I can't wait just to be home for Christmas. Just cannot wait.
You and I both, and I think those that listen to this that do travel a lot will, it'll really resonate with them because the novelty wears off very, very quickly when you travel too much, especially when you have a family and a young family like you do as well. But it was great. I agree with you. We both had the pleasure of meeting a good friend of ours, Micah, on the other side of the pond not so long ago. It was great meeting him face to face, and we've got sister podcasts, I guess, if you will, where we've got that episode out in Beyond Deadlines and Project Chatter podcast. So folks, check that one out as well. But just to bring it back, I think we thought we'd discuss some of the things we've been chatting about with various people around the globe, what's happening, a bit of the mood music in the industry right now. And when we say the industry, we're talking, I guess, more specifically around projects and infrastructure, the built environment, perhaps, maybe some other non-physical projects as well, but more around the attitudes towards AI adoption. You've got some interesting thoughts. You've provoked quite a few audiences on acceleration, which might be interesting to look at. There have also been some movements in the market with, the various leaders when it comes to AI of the various entities moving around and making noise as well. But let's start, I think, closer to home in terms of what we've been chatting about. And the conferences that we have been together on, the one I particularly enjoy is your conversation around how we view AI in, I guess, particularly project controls, but let's just talk project management in general, because you quite nicely sum it up for people, I think, where you say you can view AI as kind of two things. One is automation and the other part is generation, i.e. it generates something, and I think that really helps people because it makes it relatable, where previously AI is all these other things, large language models, and, can go down all sorts of various acronyms. But what's sort of the general response you've been finding when you've been chatting to people around the world?
What I've found is that technologists are incredibly bad at relating to normal, everyday people's experience, is what I found. And it's one of the biggest challenge in our society, in a lot of areas, not the only challenge, but one of the biggest challenges in our society is the crossing of frames. So what I mean by that is, for example, the frame of a scientist that was modeling COVID spreading to the frame of someone who wants to go visit their grandmother in hospital. The same arguments are not going to hold true with one as they do with another. And actually, I'm just seeing that trend playing out with AI. So you have, as to your point, a lot of technologists that are talking about the different chips, the data centers that are being built, the specific models that are developing, the prediction of foundational models for different industries and different practices. And to the everyday person, it's like, so what? What does that mean? And all I've been trying to do is think about one or two people that I know very deeply and how I think it might impact their lives. And that seems, to your point, to be helping some people in that. So me saying for example, it's automation or generation, the people listening to this who are very well knowledgeable on general AI know that's a false dichotomy, but it's a real dichotomy for the user, because my comfort with something that I have done for the past year is different than my comfort for something that I haven't done. So to create a dichotomy of AI can support you in doing exactly what you've done and nothing changes, to AI can help you do something new, is actually a real dichotomy in their perspective. So anyway, that's all I was thinking about it as.
Can I try and simplify it for my own simple brain there? So if I use simple mathematics, right?
Mhm.
Are we saying then that although it's all formula, it's still a formula, automation would be saying 1 plus 2 equals 3, where generation would be changing the equation, but x plus y equals
Ish,
z?
but not quite, because not quite. So to be honest, all of it is automation. It's just automation of things that I've done in the I am actually trying to do. So, for example, if I'm having to manually do x plus y equals z, and I get a calculator to do it, that's automation. But it's something that I'm very comfortable with because I understand the process. Now, let's say that because I've had to do x plus y equals z so many times, I haven't actually had time to think about a squared, something else. And if I was in an environment of abundance where I had unlimited people and unlimited time, I actually would do a squared because it's really useful to me. It's that transition. So I'll give you an example in projects. Forecasting. We could actually get teams of data scientists to come in and do very complex multivariate regression analysis on our schedules and our cost plans to create more accurate forecasts and more triangulated forecasts of the future where we combine multiple methodologies. But because of the cost of people and because of the value of that and the time it takes to do that, at some point you reach a threshold where there's no point in investing in it anymore because it's diminishing returns. But if you're not thinking about the wages of people, and in fact you're thinking about a cost of processing, which is astronomically lower, then that trade-off suddenly that graph changes. So it's the second part is this, which is in an environment of abundance, which is essentially zero marginal cost, what would I do differently, which I haven't been able to do in the past because I'm constrained on resources? And it's essentially that. Now, that is a very complex argument that I'm putting forward, which is why I simplified it to it's automation and then it's generation. Or, like I said, it's a false dichotomy, it's oversimplifying, but that's the point I was trying to get across.
Yeah, but I think it's a good one, genuinely, because, when I've repeated that to others that aren't fully au fait with AI, let alone generative AI, that makes sense to them, right? And I think to Al's point, he said it before, is you got to go to the bus stop where people are at. You can't just sort of ride the bus around town expecting people just to jump on the bus as you go. Right.
Oh, I 100% agree with that. That's actually some of the things that, the project controller event in London, where I was actually the counter AI person because, there were people there on stage essentially advocating that it's happening and you're all going to lose your jobs and unless you get on the bus right now. And it was an argument of fear, which I thought was unfounded because that's not how it works. That's not how the world works. What I kind of see this as is it's a technology, just like any other technology that we've developed in the last 200 years. It's impactful, don't get me wrong. So it's like the finding of oil. So we no longer have to use whale oil. We can dig it out of the ground for lighting and electricity. And it's like the invention of the engine. We no longer have to use oxen and horses. We can use steam locomotives. And okay, so it has enormous advantages and will transform things, but let's not forget at the heart of it, we're still trying to do the same jobs. I need to light my house so I can see. I need to move things. And in this sense, it's I need to do office work. That's all
Yeah.
it is.
Yeah, the fear mongering one's an interesting one, right? Because I was very fortunate to keynote at the House of PMO conference in Edinburgh recently, and one of the things we spoke about was that one of the biggest blockers or challenges to adopting AI, particularly in project controls, PMO, project management in general, are people. And so I did a test. I said, in this audience, who here would be comfortable getting on a plane without a pilot? And one or two people out of, I think, probably about 200-300 put their hand up. And that's interesting because we know for a fact, this is fact, that planes can take off, fly, and land themselves without a pilot. And they are they actually do. And it's been the safest mode of transport, statistically speaking, as well. Now, imagine if you use that same fear mongering that you heard on stage from airlines going, we won't have pilots on these planes and you will board them. Otherwise, you won't fly. People just go, fine, I won't fly. Right?
Yeah.
Most people will just do that. So that to me doesn't make sense. It's kind of going, okay, let's perhaps take you along the journey and make you realize that this is a safe route to take. The other one that I found has also been resonating with people is that those that do fear AI or adopting AI, I've asked them sort of, why do you fear using technology in general? And particularly with AI, I think, the main themes are, it hallucinates. I can't trust it. There's data privacy issues. I don't know what's happening with my data, all that type of thing. And I said to them, well, if you think about that, that's no different to meeting a new human being, a new person. You've got to build the relationship, the trust, know how they work, how they think. Can I trust them with my information? Is the information they're providing back to me, is that accurate or not? Can I trust it? And so you have to build a relationship with another human being. And so it's no different to when it comes to using AI. And so I don't know what your thoughts are on that, but for me, I think the past few months has just been about trying to make what's available right now accessible and relatable to people so they can start adopting it.
I think you're spot on. Actually, I'll take your model and I'll grow it. So I have a couple of thoughts that I've been thinking for years, and I don't think I'll ever conclude these thoughts because they're kind of too big and too esoteric to actually come to some form of major conclusion. But it's essentially, my first training was as a physicist, so that's hard science, as in it's the theory of nature. So it's things where multiple observers can observe and measure the same things, and you come up with laws of nature that multiple observers can correlate, which is what peer review and things is. So that's very much the world is how the world is, and our job as scientists is to try and figure out what's true, not what we believe to be true. Then I went into business and I did an education in business, so an MBA. And what I found there is that all of that statement still holds, all of that objective still holds true, but you have to insert the word perceived. Because all that matters is what humans perceive is true. It doesn't matter what is true, what matters is what is perceived to be true by a section. So actually that to me is the difference between hard sciences, which is maths, physics, chemistry, large elements of biology, and what are known as soft sciences, which are psychology, sociology, elements of geography. Geography splits in both, but you've got you've got population geography, population biology, like these kinds of things. And actually, to your perspective, think about it like this: the technology doesn't matter. We live in an economy where the only endpoints to the economy are humans. Therefore, the only thing that matters is the perceived barrier of the economy, the thing around the outside. So when people go get on board or not, what that statement is predicated on is that a majority or a super minority, so a minority with the power to impose on the majority, are actually going to adopt based on that view. And that's incorrect. So this taking people on a journey, to your point, is about perception. What I've found is that the arguments that people have of why they are against AI and why they don't use AI, when you actually really question behind the scenes, they're emotional. They're really what it is a contradiction on their core belief system, or an element where they feel left out. That's actually what they all are. So to your point, an AI hallucinating is no different than a junior planner getting it wrong. They're the same thing, but one is very acceptable because you expect them to get it wrong, and it's about developing a personal relationship, and that is accepted in the belief system. And one is about a machine that you don't trust. It's evil. And that is very different in the belief system. So that's kind of how I'm looking at this, which is, what is people's perceived reality?
Yeah, I agree. It's we've heard before that people want us to disagree and have debate and discourse, but on this one, I think we're finding trends and patterns that we agree that we're seeing in the market and commenting on those, and it's difficult because we want to give everyone a flavor of what's happening. And the thing that I love, the fact that you bring up perception as well. For a large part, in most part, who controls perception when it comes to delivering projects? If we bring it back to project delivery, and I think there's more and more it's becoming PMO and project controls, because that's traditionally, or is more and more, is actually where most of the data and information insight comes out of.
Whoever gates information controls perception.
Yes,
That's the
absolutely.
rule.
And then you can package that with visualization, with numbers, but also with what you say. And we all know that humans have different experiences, have different ways of communicating. That's through your verbal communication, your written communication, your non-verbal communication, your body language tells you a lot as well. I mean, any of the best project directors out there will look at how confident someone is when they say something, whether you're the project manager or the project controls or PMO person or the risk manager, it doesn't matter, right? And they'll look for these subliminal messages. And so you also get inconsistent value when it comes to solely relying just on people, because people have different experience levels as well.
Yeah.
And so your perception varies dependent on the person. That's the variable in all of this. I think my message is that if you use technology, you can scale consistency. Therefore, an element of perception can be consistent and scalable in the right way. And so you can still control the perception. In most instances, that's, what most PMs, PDs look to do to their stakeholders. And I think a lot of people go, well, they shouldn't be doing that because it's, what's the phrase that Bent likes to use, Bent Flerberg? It's intentional misrepresentation or something like that.
Yeah, I think there's a very big spectrum between intentional misrepresentation, accidental misrepresentation, and representation in context, so that people don't if you could propose data, but if there's no context or explanation around the data, you're leaving it up to the reader to make their own conclusion. Which, by the way, you might go, well, that's what we want to do, but if the data is incomplete because you need context to understand if it's good or bad, then, and I'll give you an example of this, the more chocolate that Britain consumes, the more people die.
Yeah.
Okay? Now, you could read that as, oh my God, chocolate is killing people. Well, no. My analysis is just based on a cumulative graph of consumption of chocolate. So every year it will go up because people consume and no one can unconsume chocolate. And also it's a cumulative graph of deaths. Why? Because people die. So it's just purely two numbers that are correlated, but without that context,
Yeah.
you could come to the conclusion chocolate is killing people. So I do believe there's an element of contextual understanding that is required that isn't purely in numbers.
Yeah, no, I love that, and when I heard you say it for the first time, I was like, yeah, that's pretty cool because it brings it back down to earth for people to relate to. I think it's strategic misrepresentation was the phrase I was looking at, which he uses. But I agree with you because then all of a sudden, if you bring it back to controlling the narrative, if you want, there is this balance, and I think we discussed this offline when we saw each other around how we, truth doesn't always lead to order, generally speaking, right? And you need order in order to deliver projects safely,
Yeah.
faster, more efficient, etc., etc. And so there is this balance of true fact versus how you package that in the right way to create order. And I think that's a skill that people don't really have. And for me, if we're trying to futurescape of how tech is going to influence future roles, we're probably going to have to get into, I don't know what the right word for it is into a role where you've got sort of a perception master or whatever you want to call it, where we've got the facts and we know the facts are correct, but how do we use this to then create the perception to allow everyone to go in the right direction to deliver this project? I know I'm speaking quite generally here because there's a general technology, but maybe we can bring some specific use cases.
I think that this is an element that so AI can help this now. You can put into like ChatGPT, write me this in this tone of voice, or here's some data, present it positively, or something like that. I think there's a level where if we just take the concept of the automation, the question is what level are you automating? So are you automating a ground level, like 1 add 1 equals 2? Are you automating a level above, which is choosing which equation to use? Are you automating a level above that, which is understanding when equations need to be used? Are you automating the level above that, which is reading the context and figuring out what the perception needs to be, which is why you need to calculate things, etc. So there's a level to this, and from the perception of a technologist, I don't pontificate on what that is, because that's actually for humans to decide. As in, it's for the market to demand it. That's really what I'm saying here. Technologists build things, and people buy things, and people buy what they like, and people reject what they don't. And it's not what's right or wrong. It's like or dislike. So could you build an AI that does control the perception of a project? Absolutely. Would you have thousands of customers buy that across the world? Maybe not. And really that's where this whole argument of AI is going to conquer everything kind of starts to unravel for me, is the likes and dislikes of people, either privately or in the office.
Yeah, it's a very interesting one. I think, just on that last section there, we'll get a lot of people thinking about how they use it, how they use AI, how they use technology in general. But if we get a little bit specific on this, what are some of the perceptions, in your opinion, that are wrong in the project world today? Because I've heard you talk about a couple of them to various audiences, and I think there's probably some that listen to this podcast that wouldn't have heard you say that, and maybe they can challenge you back if they think differently.
Yeah.
But I know that you're definitely not afraid to put your thoughts and opinions out there. So yeah, let us have it.
And for the listeners,
what's wrong
by the
with
way,
all?
that's all they are. They're thoughts and opinions. I think about this. I try and think about this very deeply, but I am not my opinions. Like, I am a father. I'm a husband. I have a dog. Like, that's my life. my opinions are ideas, and ideas come and go. So I'm not precious about ideas. I just try to understand the world a little better than I did yesterday. And if someone has a better opinion, I'd love to hear it.
Yeah, I love your phrase where, strong opinions loosely held. Convince me otherwise, and I'm happy to change it. And I think that's the great thing about all of us on this podcast is that, we'll put out strong views, but give us a decent argument. We're happy to change our minds. But let's get into it. Perceptions, okay? What are some of the perceptions that you think aren't necessarily the right ones?
So there's a whole. I'll give you. Let me try and give 3 or 5 off the top of my head, and we can dive down into anyone. So there's obviously a big one about what AI is and what it will do to project management and project controls. But we've talked about that. Another one actually is that the construction industry is not profitable. That's a very big misconception. Another one is the construction industry is broken, or projects industry is broken. That's a very, very big misconception. By the way, these are not technology ones. These are fundamental beliefs that are shared across the industry, but people cannot explain why they believe these to be true in general. But I have evidence that they're not true. Another one. Let me think of another one. Another one is that project management needs to fundamentally change. And the word is fundamentally there. That, to me, is a very big misconception because humans have been successfully delivering projects for thousands of years, and we can debate that. And a fifth one would be actually, this is an element of change. A fifth one is that project management is a social science, not a hard science. And actually, the answer is it's both. And that's something that I believe people will start really realizing in the next couple of years.
Yeah. There's a lot there. There's probably plenty more, folks listening to this.
Yeah, I just picked 5 off the top of my head.
Which is great. I love it because that just will get the juices flowing. So which one should we go down? Let's go down the one where the perception is that did you say the construction industry is broken?
Yeah.
So why do you think people think that it's broken, and why isn't it?
Two large reasons. Well, two pieces of evidence that I see a lot of people anchoring on to show that it's broken in some way. Evidence point number 1 is actually from the writings of Ben, and McKinsey, which is essentially 98% of all projects don't meet their schedule and cost targets. But the fundamental of that analysis is they're examining initial business case, and then they're examining project output. And you're making the assumption there that the project that was put forward during the initial business case is the project that was eventually delivered at the end. And anyone who works in projects knows that that is not the case. Projects are actually complex evolving entities, and to think that you can stick to a deterministic world when you're building something of very big scale, and the more new technology, processes, people, and locations you bring into a system, the more unpredictable generally the system will be. So that is a falsehood, and actually it's about it's about the evolution of change. That's actually really what that is. And actually, just a final point on that one. This is actually just a general problem in Western government operations at the moment, that they require hard business cases to prove taxpayer value before something will be done. when a huge number of people aren't actually educated on the history of infrastructure and construction, so cannot properly represent the value that certain assets will produce. So that's a general problem. The second one is actually a study put out by McKinsey that basically says that the construction industry hasn't increased in productivity in like 30 years compared to other industries. And that is actually based on GDP figures, which are to some extent predicated on profit figures, and the business model of a lot of projects, at least in the UK, is return on capital employed, not return on sale. So there's a fundamental disconnect in how those numbers calculate. And I'll just give you an example, which is like for like. So let's remove crazy permitting and advanced legals and advanced documentation, which has come in the last 20 years. Is a pipe fitter or an electrician today genuinely less productive, like for like, than a pipe fitter and electrician 30 years ago, given the fact we have the internet, mobile phones, iPads to see designs, more complex scheduling and processing? Like, the answer to that is obviously not. The job has changed, which has eaten away. But so those are actually two of them. So the first one is that projects fail, and the second one, which is a perception thing, and the second one is that construction is unproductive.
Yeah, for me, what I take from it, and again, unsurprisingly, I 100% agree with you. The success measures are incorrect.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not so. Whilst I do think that needs to be looked at. The bigger issue for me is that people and organizations that have prominent voices, they're feeding the beast, so to speak, because if enough people tell you that there's something wrong, you start believing it.
Well,
and then
that's
industry at
exactly what's
large
happened here.
Yeah. And so the perception is we're broken. And we're not. Actually, there's a lot of good things that happen in construction. And why else would people get into it? But if you believe that it's broken, you'll get into this mindset, this circular economy, if you will, that things will never get better because they've never got better, right? That's the rhetoric. That's the story that we've been told, that we've been going for years, decades, centuries, and things haven't improved. And so, we always say, well, yeah, surely, they had problems when they built the pyramids. I mean, a lot of people died. We know that. Far fewer people are dying. I mean, it's still a problem these days, health and safety. But with the construction techniques we have today, and how project management has improved over the centuries and decades, there has been improvement. Now, if you change your measure from various decades, through the time, then you're going to get the story, the narrative you want to tell. And so you then have to ask yourself what these prominent voices and organizations, what do they have to gain by telling you it's broken?
Mm-hmm.
Right? What's the motive? What's the motive
Speaking
of saying
opportunities and consulting revenue is generally the answer to this.
Sure. So it's capitalism.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And
I'll tell you a story, and I'll give you enough value that makes you believe me, but I'll gate finding a solution or getting enough of the information to be able to create the solution behind a paywall. That's generally the model.
Yeah. And so do you applaud them for going, you've spotted a gap in the market and you're using emotive language to generate self-worth?
I actually have I have no emotion about it, is what it is, because no system is perfect, and that this is, and I'm not saying that they're incorrect, by the way. I'm just saying that these are potential flaws that I've spotted, and I have to say, very few people have the privilege, like you and I do, to actually sit and consider these things. Like most people have to, get home and look after families and like actually deliver projects and do valuable stuff as opposed to pontificating over this kind of thing. But just generally, we live in a moderately capitalist economy, and it's not full capitalist because you have government intervention and things, but a moderate capitalist. And part of that system is that people will buy what they like and people will reject what they don't. And if things are proven to be likable, they will be purchased more. And if things are proven to be dislikable, they will be rejected more. Now, that's not to say that the things that are likable are good. So there's a very big debate about whether or not social media is a good thing, or cigarettes is a good thing, or to be honest, more pressing, alcohol is a good thing. Because all the studies were like, oh, this is terrible. Yeah, but I'm a free person and I like my whiskey. So it's like, it's just that. Now, the people writing thought pieces are generally really what I call top tier consultants. So they're very expensive, and they get paid because of very deep expertise they have in specific areas, as opposed to, for example, body shopping consultancies, which are basically providing the workforce. And to be able to sell very high expertise, you have to have positions on certain things, which is AKA called thought leadership. So it's just the nature of the business that they're in that they have to have a position on something. Now, they might genuinely think that their position is true and a good one. That's okay. Like, the market will buy what it likes and it will reject what it doesn't like.
Yeah, and it's simple, right? Simple economics. You like sort of economics, macro and micro, and identify a need or create a need. Good old.
That's exactly what a thought leadership article is. It's creating a need.
Yeah, and then saying I've got the solution. Sort of sell me this pen. We all remember that scene.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is great, and I think this is a fascinating conversation because this will resonate with a lot of people, and us sort of, unscripted, just thinking about it on the fly is great because we start thinking now, as you say, taking the opportunity to go, why, and we might be wrong, but these are our guesses and our opinions, and I think the message, bringing it back, is clear that it's about perception, and who actually owns that perception is you and us as individuals, right? Because we control our perception. We can choose to let something influence our perception or not.
Mm-hmm.
Often we think we're not in control, but you're in control of picking your phone up and looking at social media, right? If you train yourself or give yourself the habit of, I'll only look at it, for 10 minutes a day, then guess what? It'll influence your perception less. But it's that self-control. And so I then go into sort of the human element of it is how much, are people self-aware of what their own actions are, because this contributes back to...
I'll actually tell you, I think you're spot on. I think there's a thing with AI, which is when enterprise AI gets properly rolled out in the next couple of years, there's a whole department of product development, which is one of the terms used to call their actions is gamification, but in reality it's addiction, which is exactly what's happened to social media. Why does Facebook have a constant scrolling feed, and Instagram and Twitter, not pages to turn?
Yeah.
Which is a design feature. It's because it creates the want. It's the whole. If you put a rat and a button, and it presses the button, and a food pellet comes out, but it only comes out sometimes, but not every time, the rat will get an addiction to pressing the button and will rapidly press it. It's the same with social media. If you scroll and you see a piece of content that you enjoy, you will continuously scroll to try and get that hit again. And scrolling is a very simple movement because your brain thinks that it's below. It thinks it's just on the surface. Whereas turning the page is a full movement which makes you think that it's in a different place. So that it's these kinds of things. So anyway, that is something that I'm actually quite wary about, which is when these enterprise AIs get deployed, there will be a lot of that thought being put into the addiction of agents.
And what would make us addicted to agents, or does it have to be? Because if there's something that someone else has designed just to do a set of tasks in a workflow, and
that's
it has
fine.
autonomy,
By the way, I think that the enterprise will be less addictive.
Yeah.
It's going to be the consumer AIs that are very addictive.
Yeah.
And I actually saw a couple of pornographic startups get funded that were essentially creating companions.
Really?
That is by definition an addictive agent.
Virtual? I'm guessing.
Virtual companions where you can design your perfect companion, and they even have like a face and a body and things like that. And you can text them and you can talk to them like you're in a relationship.
And I think the majority of people would be like, "Oh, that's totally wrong, unethical, immoral." And I'm not suggesting it's
The market will
otherwise.
buy what it likes, and it will reject what it doesn't. And you might have those views, but OnlyFans makes billions of dollars a year.
Yeah. It's an interesting one because, humans are emotive and we go on feelings, and you generally have your circle of friends that you have because they make you feel good about yourself, generally. We all have probably that one dick in the group, and if you don't have the dick in the group, it's probably you. But generally speaking, you have your group of friends and the people you associate with because you like them, and it's all to do with emotion. But it's crazy how we started talking about AI and got into the human aspect. But I think this is important because a lot of people that talk about AI, data, or tech don't necessarily cross the bridge between that and how it relates to human beings. And as you say, the endpoints are humans, right? And so you can't talk about any technology without considering the human aspect. And I know we've almost gone sort of the full episode just talking about one misconception, potential misconception, our views on what we think is not perceived correctly. Do we have time for perhaps one more? And I want to pick up, this is one you didn't mention on this episode, but you've mentioned before, around the perceived unit value of PMO or project controls. And I love it because most teams get asked, how many people do you have in your PMO team or your project controls team? And so naturally the perceived value is in the number of people. But we've just discussed that people are different experiences, inconsistencies, etc. So it's not scalable. And so the unit value should be, in your opinion, and you've convinced me in my opinion, the output, the insight. And how can you create more insights, and how can you create scalable, consistent insights that you can make decisions off of to improve value. So maybe we can finish just on that one for the project controls PMO geeks.
So again, this is down to human perception about, like, business cases are written, but really people have made their mind up the business cases to justify an opinion they've already had. And we've all been in the environment where it's like, that's not what the answer I want. Please go back and consider these other things. So in one element is, like, why do people buy things? Well, it's because they get more value than the perceived cost. So the value you can get. So if you're a project director, you're getting, it's not just the information you're getting. You're getting amazing information, but you've got people who you respect and are very responsive, which, to be honest, is a comforting feeling. So I feel comforted. Also, if they're very good, you're not surprised by anything, which means you feel safe. So it's a safe and comfort emotion value proposition. Then on the other side, if they've got stakeholders that are coming visiting, and it's a very competent project controls function that can articulate itself well, then it's also impressive. So it's a positive. So, and humans are very much geared to the downside compared to the upside, which is why I talked about the downside. So a very good project controls function actually invokes the feelings of comfort, safety, and support with a little bit of excitement. So that's actually what's being sold. How you do that is kind of irrelevant, and this is why a lot of people get mixed up. But that's what you're selling. Now, the cost, it's not my money. It's someone else's money. So actually, the cost is my time and my reputation. Because if I sign off a business case, it's not my money, it's my reputation I'm putting on the line to have that. Now, the reputation is obviously a logical thing and a transposed thing. So if a logical thing is, do these numbers make sense? A transposed thing is, that person was a fool. You hired a fool, therefore you must be a fool too. It's that kind of logical process. So in this scenario, what you're actually looking in cost, like I said, is worry and social ostracization, which is the biggest fear of all humans, apart from suffocation, basically, is social ostracization. It's the whole one where people will press buttons to electrocute people to death rather than feel left out of a group, that kind of thing. Now, within that whole framework, people become comfortable with a scenario. So if you're doing a great job and you cost X, at the start they might have gone, that was expensive, but very quickly that will just become the known cost of something. There's no absolute cost in the world, it's all perspective. It's the reason why McDonald's has a medium cup and a large cup next to each other, and the medium is nearly the same cost as the large, but the large is much bigger than the medium. It's because you wouldn't consider it large if it was on its own, but it becomes large when it's next to something. And it's the same thing here. So if you charge X and you could deliver a good service, suddenly that will be the price of a good service. And then that flexes up and down to the limit of emotion and stress. So, the day you will lose a contract is the day that someone emotionally believes this is not worth it. Not logically, emotionally believes it's not worth it. Now, that's an entire argument from emotion. Well, why am I saying this? Well, one, I've kind of laid it out as a bit of an equation that you can consider. And two, is project controllers are generally by definition hard scientists. They're numbers and logic and natural driven, not sociological driven. But this is really the whole concept. So when you're making an argument for the value of project controls and why you need 10 people, it's actually an argument about how much comfort, safety, security, and a little bit of pleasure you're going to give a group of people for a very minimum amount of social risk and cost. Because, and by the way, I say a little amount of social risk and cost. I can put a contract together for 100 million for my services. But if I clearly deliver incredible value, they're going to look like geniuses for signing it. So the social risk can be very low, even though the value is very high. And that's how that's actually how I would look at selling project controls. And actually, I'm going to flip this round now, Dale, because you own a very successful project controls consultancy. Is anything that I've just said completely incorrect?
100%. Anyone worth their salt in project controls, PMO, can do the theory, can do the technical bit, right?
Mm-hmm.
You get taught that all the time. You can even go and apply it practically, right? The logic. This is how it works. You put this in here, through the sausage machine, it comes out here.
Yep.
The differentiator is hearts and minds. Can you win hearts and minds?
Charisma.
Charisma.
Yes.
Can you convince people? Can you take them on the journey? Can you allow them to be part of what you've done so that they can see what you're adding is of value? And so yeah, it's a very difficult to disagree with you in that part, Greg. Even though I'm trying to find angles for the audience.
You could definitely find angles on the particularities of the things I've said. So we might disagree on the safety and comfort and security. You might go, well, what exactly is that? You could press me really hard on what it is, and there comes a level where it just depends on the individual, and it depends on what I think is the right thing and you think is the right thing. So we'll definitely have disagreement there. But
safety and comfort bit, if I can just comment on that, for me, the safety and comfort bit is on the trust and the relationship you built. Not necessarily saying that everything's okay all the time, but if
no, you're
you
right.
my
It's
stakeholder,
emotional safety and comfort.
yes, yeah,
And by the way, building a relationship based on trust creates emotional.
yeah.
Even if you go, this is bad news. I'm going to give you bad news.
Yeah, 100%. And that for me is, it's having that relationship where you might say one thing and I go, and we've had this as well, where I disagree with you, Greg, and these are the reasons why. And we can have that in a safe and comforting environment. We talk about psychological safety and the like. But look, we are heading towards the end of this one, and I think you've given plenty, people things to think about, not just in project controls, but in project management in general. And, Greg, it's episode 19. We're going to end off the year with one more 20 episodes for
Can't
the year.
wait for the 20th. That'll be fun.
Yeah, it's our first. This is our first year, in essence, of the Gen AI podcast, and it's been an interesting experiment because that is what this is. It's an experiment. We've had 0 guests on, which is strange for a lot of podcasts because typically they have guests on, where it's just been the same old voices and faces. And can we generate enough interest, intrigue, and discussion? And I think we have, based on the bits of feedback we have got. So we'll keep going again in the new year, but we'll have one more to finish off this year, episode 20. And we'll hopefully get all 4 together, even though we've only ever had 3 at most.
Never. Never. We almost got Val for this one, but nope.
But before we sign off, any final thoughts you want to leave the listeners with on this one?
No, I'd just like to thank everyone who's listened for listening. And doubly thank everyone who's commented, because it's much more fun when it's a negotiation or a discussion than it is just a one-way street or us. Essentially, what this podcast is a group of friends having a beer in a pub, and we're recording it so just other people can hear. So I'd just like to say thank you for joining us in our pub of random chat.
I couldn't have said it better, so I'll leave it there, folks. Thank you for joining us on this episode. Please share, if you like what you've heard, to the rest of the community. We'll catch up with you on episode 20. Bye for now. Take care.